President Biden wrapping up his trip out west with a final stop in Utah today.
This after dodging questions from our own Peter Doocy about his alleged ties to Hunter business dealings.
That's right.
Jump on over, Peter. Look at that.
And Peter Doocy.
I'm coming to you, President.
Peter Doocy joins us right now with details. Peter, I believe you are in New Mexico. The president left New Mexico and has continued his West Coast trip. Tell us a little bit about that opportunity to pose the first question about Devon Archer's testimony last week.
So let's talk about the opportunity to do it then. Let's go back to that video. And this is a disclaimer for anybody watching at home. Do not try this at home. Do not jump over a barricade towards a president or towards anybody with a Secret Service detail. But basically what happened is, at the very end of this event in New Mexico, the president noticed that I was there near where he was going to exit, and I was the last man standing in the press area. He started to wave me over. I thought that that meant that I could just go. There was a staffer standing there, and you can see in the beginning of that clip, who was saying, the president does not have time for this right now. But I was looking over this staffer who was just following instructions. I was looking over his shoulder, and I could see the president going like this, and the Secret Service lead next to him saying, come to us. So that is when I bounced over the bike rack. And it was really important to try to get to him because he has not addressed anything concerning this testimony, these stories, allegations about his son's business, what Republicans are saying, trying to link the president to the Hunter Biden business deals. And so we want to give him a chance to set the record straight. And that is what we did. Here's that clip.
There's this testimony now where one of your son's former business associates is claiming that you were on speakerphone a lot with them talking business. Is that what?
I never talk business in anyone. And I knew you'd have a lousy question.
Well, why is that a lousy question?
Because it's not true.
Thank you, Mr. President.
And as soon as I got back to the rental car in the parking lot at that wind tower plant that used to be a Solo Cup plant, which is the fun fact of yesterday, I heard from a White House official who was disputing the very premise of that question, that we were asking about talking business on speakerphone, because in Devon Archer's testimony, he doesn't say that they talked business specifically. But Devon Archer later did come out to say it is categorically false that President Biden, then Vice President Biden, did not know what was going on with Hunter while all of this was happening. And so that is why we asked the question that we did, and we appreciate President Biden waving us over. Again, the only time that it's ever okay to jump a barricade at a presidential event is if you are waved over. Otherwise, don't try it. Back to
you. But Peter, you seem a little bit surprised, as I was. They just said lousy question. I mean, he's rating your question now. Do you think it was a lousy question?
No, and in terms of his rating of my questions to him, that was just middle of the road. I understand that they don't want to talk about this.
Right.
He has spent most of August trying to promote a green economy. He's been on vacation. They have been taking a strategy where they want the attention to be on the Republican frontrunner. They want the attention to be on Trump in court. And they don't want to be talking about possible legal problems for their side. Right. And so I understand why he would not like the question. But again, if they could just set the record straight and explain exactly what happened a couple years ago away from the cameras, then this story probably, depending on what the explanation is, this story and the intrigue around it becomes less and less, because we would have answers. That's what we were trying to do. So, lousy question? I don't think so. But he's the president.
What's interesting, too, is you're right. Your leg went over the top of that bike rack, and the staffers were saying, no, no, no. And then once the president says come over and Secret Service says come over, you can. So you jumped over the bike rack and you went to talk to him. But he seems to criticize your questions. You're one of the few that's asking him these tough questions. But yet he invited you over.
Yes, and he has told me privately and publicly that he knows the questions are going to be hard, but that I've got to keep asking them. That's from him.
Okay.
And so, to his credit, when he waved me over, he knew that I wasn't going to ask him, hey, how great was that Bidenomics speech just now? He knew it was going to be something tough, and he took it anyway. So he does deserve a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, and Peter, you know, I think the headline is the president had the opportunity to deny that he ever talked on a speakerphone, and he didn't. Instead, he said, you know, I didn't talk about business, which is what he told you at the Iowa State Fair, what, 4 years ago?
Yes, and that is brand new, because we had not heard anything really on the record from the White House about these calls. He is saying, and his staff is saying, they did not talk business. He's not saying they did not talk at all. And so that is new. And again, it just, if we can catch up to him soon, maybe there can be a further explanation about what they talked about. That was as much as we could get.
Right.
That jump over the bike
and
rack.
I don't know if you get the New York Post, if the New York Post is delivered to your door before you go to work in the morning, but the cover of the Post of last week was a personal card, handwritten, P.S. I'm glad to Devon Archer. You and my son are working together. So they are talking about the work they're doing together, but he's not talking, he's admitting to everything except for specifically involved, but every single major deal involves some type of meeting, speakerphone or person to person with the president. And Peter, what's most striking is, where's the money? We hear that Hunter Biden has no money, but we see millions of dollars, cars handed off, $1 million a year from Burisma, let alone the tax problems, but where's the money now? Isn't anyone trying to find out where this money is?
That is what the House Republicans say that they are trying to figure out. They haven't been able to produce any direct linkage yet. I think that is something that White House officials are getting more and more frustrated about, that there are all these big accusations about bribery and corruption, but there is no direct link. And something Devon Archer said in his testimony, and we've looked at the transcript, he said that they never had the then vice president talking business specifics. They weren't sitting around looking at like proposals or spreadsheets. That part seems to be understood by everybody that is looking at this, that nobody was asking President Biden to go over their reports before the end of the quarter. But what exactly they were talking about, and who, say that they were not talking business, because that's what the president told us.
Talked about the weather.
We have to go with that.
Only the weather.
Talk about the weather. Say that, we will take the president at his word there. But then who did he think these people were on the phone?
Sure. So Peter, you returned from work after a number of weeks on paternity leave. 3 days in, you think Joe just thought, hey, Peter Doocy, come on over here. Tell me about the baby.
If you look at the bike rack, it kind of looks like a crib, the side of a crib, and so it's just the same idea, just trying to get in there.
That's what
I just told your dad that. I said, don't show your daughter that video. She's going to get an idea, because that's what it starts with, the first leg, and then the parents see there, and the parents say, no.
It's an easy step if you're 6'7".
Right, and Ainsley said Peter looks like he's climbing out of a crib.
Right.
Which I saw about 35 years ago.
And my doctor said, the pediatrician said, the moment Hayden tries to do that, you have to put her in a big girl bed, because she could actually fall out. So don't show Bridget that yet.
We will not let her see that yet. She doesn't need to hear that her dad had a lousy question until she's a little bit older.
Oh, it's going to live on in the internet. Somebody's put it on your Wikipedia. Peter stuck around in New Mexico just to be on Fox and Friends this morning. Peter, thank you very much. Go home now.
Right.
All right, see you.
All right, so it's just pretty amazing. And the overarching, pun intended, the overarching theme is, what is the business? What business are you actually doing? What is Devon Archer and Hunter Biden producing, and Eric Sherwin? What are they doing for the Moscow mayor's wife? What are they doing for the Kazakhstan billionaire? What are they doing for the Russian oligarch? What are they doing? What did he actually do for Burisma, except for have influence provided by a guy that's had the same job since the 1970s? So it is right on the cusp. I think he has a lot of explaining to do, but he only wants to talk about the weather.
Yep, more later, we hope. In the meantime, we got a peek at something that nobody knew about. Apparently on January 17th, it sounds like Jack Smith,
Just a few months ago.
Yeah, Jack Smith, the special prosecutor for the U.S. government, got a search warrant to search, God bless you, Donald Trump's Twitter account, which had been closed for a long time. Court papers were unsealed yesterday. And the judge issued this search warrant after Elon Musk took over Twitter as part of an inquiry, apparently, into how Donald Trump tried to overturn the 2020 election. And you know what? In the beginning, because there was a non-disclosure agreement where Twitter could not tell the former president that his account was being searched, Twitter was resistant to comply. And so they were held in contempt by a court, by a judge. It was upheld on appeal. They did comply 3 days later, but they were fined $350,000.
I give Elon Musk so much credit.
For
the
not
old Twitter,
responding.
just say, listen, I'm telling everybody, if you put something on my site, you're not going to have it. We're not going to be selling your personal information. Then the FBI, Jack Smith, with this Department of Justice, says, I need everything from the president. Okay, the former president. No. And he said they went to a court of appeals. The court of appeals went with Jack Smith. So I guess they want his DMs. I don't know anyone that's been direct message from the president because every other tweet has been out in the public. So what else? What's the big secret?
He had millions of people following him when he was on Twitter.
Yeah.
Do you really think he's responding to DMs? I doubt it.
Yeah. No, I've never. I don't know anybody who says the president.
The president responded to me.
The papers that have been revealed so far, and this story first picked up by Politico, it is unclear what exactly they were looking for. But when you get a search warrant, you would be able to figure out, are there any unsent drafts that were not sent, and also who had access to the account. In other words, who was actually pushing the buttons? Because, we talked to one of the former president's lawyers a couple of days ago regarding whether or not anybody's looking over his social media right now, and she was cagey about it and said he can do what he wants, but she said there's a process in place given the legal peril that he is currently in. So you got to figure somebody else might have had access. Maybe that's what they were looking into. We don't know.
Remember he tweeted out the Covfefe? He's like,
that's what we need spell check.
He's the one
that's right.
That's tweeting things out.
Covfefe.
But here's the thing. I mean, think about Jack Smith in January. Let's go to the most popular Twitter user ever since suspended, invited back, and let's go into his tweets. Think about how aggressive they're going after him. We will find the crime eventually. CBS did a poll. 38% of the people polled say they're more concerned about charges against Trump are politically motivated. Only 24% are more concerned about the charges. And one thing is pretty clear. He says with every charge as serious as it is, his poll numbers go up, and it must frustrate the rest of the field. And head-to-head with Joe Biden, he's either tied or leading in the most polls.
Donald Trump said on Truth Social, it's a major hit. This is in part of what he wrote. Major hit on my civil rights. My political opponents going crazy, trying to infringe on my campaign for president. Nothing like this has ever happened before. Does the First Amendment still exist? Did deranged Jack Smith tell the unselects to destroy and delete all evidence? These are some dark days in America.
The appeals court said that what they were asking for did not infringe on the former president's First Amendment rights. Meanwhile, let's talk a little bit about what's going on in a lot of big sanctuary cities, and that is there are so many migrants. The mayors in these largely Democratic cities are asking the federal government, and in particular the White House, for help. And there you can see some of the migrants who arrived in New York City yesterday. Mayor Adams here said the price could cost New York City for all the migrants $12 billion. There are currently about 60,000 here. 100,000 could come. He's asking Joe Biden to declare a state of emergency. But Joe Biden would never do that because Joe Biden created the emergency. And according to the New York Post today, Tom Perez, who is one of the president's top advisors, is going to sit down with the mayor, and they're going to try to come up with a way to somehow finance what is going on here in New York City. Because when you think about it, Mayor Adams said it's costing New York $10 million every day. Can you imagine what New York City could do with $10 million a day? Right now, it's going to this migrant problem.
Wow. Could you imagine? Our taxes are so high already if they just put that money back in our pocketbooks. Joe Germano, he's 66 years old. He's Lady Gaga's dad, and he's been on our show a few times. He's such a nice guy. In fact, he kept calling Lady Gaga Stephanie. I was like, that is not her name. I know you named her, but we know her as Gaga. Yeah, so he owns this restaurant called Joanne Trattoria, and he's lived on 70th Street on the west side. If you're looking at a map, it's the west side of Central Park on the Upper West Side. And he's owned this restaurant for 35 years. They've lived there for 35 years. He raised his girls there. And he said he would never raise his girls here if it looked like this when they were little. He said the city quietly and quickly transformed the Stratford Arms Hotel into a place for a shelter for hundreds of migrants. And he said, if it was like this when my girls were growing up, I wouldn't be living in New York. The worst part's at night, the noise. It starts at about 10 o'clock and it'll go until 4 in the morning, playing music and racing their motocross and motorbikes up and down the streets. I don't mind having them there, but at least manage it. Put the proper security in place. Have a police presence and a code of conduct. They're guests in our neighborhood, and they have basically taken over.
He says, yeah, they're flooding the Ritzy neighborhood with a constant stream of hookers and bad behavior. So that's unbelievable. Arthur Aidala, who is in on some of the meetings with this liaison from the federal government to Mayor Adams, said that basically they said, hold on till after the election. If Biden gets reelected, you'll get all the money you need. How cynical and how horrible is that? On a daily basis, Americans' lives are affected. Hotels are overrun. People sleeping on boxes. Other parks are being taken over. Kids told they can't play sports because of illegal immigration. He won't crack down on the border. He won't do the financing. And as Eric Adams said, he goes, we might have the biggest hearts, but we don't have the biggest wallets. We can't afford all this. And it's all due to a fellow Democrat, President Biden, and Mayorkas, who could not be more incompetent if he tried. But it's not just a New York problem. The Democratic state of Massachusetts is overrun. They're asking their citizens to help out any way possible. The Democratic mayor speaking out yesterday. We know the police station in Chicago, Philadelphia, the second biggest place for illegal immigration, Los Angeles, outside New York City. Democrat, Democrat, Democrat. And it's so brilliant to get the pressure off the border cities and states and now put it into the rest of the country to feel their pain. And that's why between 15 and 25 Democratic lawmakers are standing up saying, crack down on the border now, or we're going to get slammed in the election justifiably.
Brian, you're leaving out the headline regarding Massachusetts, where they do have it's a state with a right to shelter law. You come in as a homeless family, they've got to provide you something. They are saying, the governor there is saying, we don't have enough money, we don't have enough space in the shelters, so we want the people of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to open their doors, let the migrants live with you. Now think about it.
Were they vetted?
Exactly. Are they healthy? Have they been vetted?
Are they criminals?
Background check. Are people just supposed to go down to a local church and pick somebody up? I mean,
put them in the room next to your child?
Yeah, I don't think this is a really good idea.
No. You want to do that. You want to believe people are good, but we don't know if they are.
Is there anything more fundamentally irresponsible than the President of the United States having a policy that has people streaming in through our northern border, maybe for the first time in our history, and breaking our southern border and overrunning our cities and communities and our schools? Is there anything more irresponsible? I can't imagine what it is.
All right. Well, coming up, criminals, we're staying on this subject, criminals are calling the shots in Seattle, and cops are calling it quits now, including our next guest, who registered after she actually resigned. She had a 15-page resignation letter after 2 decades in uniform. She's going to tell us why next.
Virgin Galactic set to launch its second space tourism flight later this morning, which means I won't be on it. And one member of the crew has been waiting for this moment for nearly 2 decades. Kelly O'Grady joins us live from Spaceport America in New Mexico. Hey, Kelly.
Hey, good to see you. That's right. We've got a 3-passenger crew, 3-flight crew, and Virgin Galactic is planning to do this monthly going forward, which is a good thing because they have a hefty backlog of passengers. So we've got a couple of firsts today. This is the first majority female space flight, the first mother-daughter duo, and the first Olympian. John Goodwin, who you were mentioning, he bought his ticket 18 years ago for $250,000. Since then, he's been diagnosed with Parkinson's, but he is still making the trip today at 80 years old. Now, what makes this unique is we're not launching a vertical rocket. It is what looks like 2 airplanes fused together on top of a spaceship. It'll take about 90 minutes in total for the passengers to go through their flight. I got to look at this in a simulator yesterday. It'll take 45 to 60 minutes to make it up to space almost, 1 minute of vertical acceleration, and then they will experience 3 to 5 minutes of weightlessness, some pretty cool views of the Earth, and then they will descend back to Earth. Now, Ainsley, we are hoping for a 10:30 Eastern takeoff. The only thing that is going to prevent that is the weather, and I have seen some lightning in the distance, but fingers crossed. I'll send it back to you, Ainsley.
Say in a prayer. They are so brave to do this, but good for them. Thank you so much, Kelly. Okay, crime in Seattle is so bad. One lieutenant who wore the uniform for 2 decades, a little more than 2 decades, is now calling it quits, writing the scathing 15-page letter to her boss. She says, quote, "Chief Diaz, let me tell you, the state of the Seattle Police Department and the city is a disgrace. The criminals are running the city." Now, former Lieutenant Jessica Taylor wrote that, and she joins us now. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on. I'm sure, we read the letter. Here it is, right here. It's front to back, 15 pages. It goes on and on about how disappointed you are when you work for a company or an agency like this for more than 20 years. That has to just be devastating. Tell us why you wrote this letter and why you decided to resign.
It is. I moved to Seattle in 1998. It was absolutely beautiful, and it was clean, and the department had a great reputation, and it was outstanding. And then just over the year, and I was able to do my job, and I thought I did it really well. But over the years, it has just gone from the very top to the very bottom. And I can't do it anymore. I can't live the lie. I've poured my heart, my soul into all of this. And so I wanted to go out saying the truth. Yeah, so I did.
You write, dedicating over 23 long and soul-draining years of my life to this city. You criticize Chief Diaz, the city council, and the mayor, and you say that there was lying, rampant corruption, favoritism, and deceit. Tell us specifically what is going on.
My gosh, that's a loaded question. Well, there is systems in place where you are an officer, then take a test, then you promote to sergeant, and then you promote again to lieutenant, and you promote again to captain, and then you're rewarded by going up to assistant chief, and then you deputy chief and above. Well, recently, that has quit happening. You get to skip some people get to skip the captain test and the captain gig altogether and go straight to assistant chief. So that's one thing. The other thing is just the lack of support from management. And I was in management. You know, I'm just horrified at the way that management just does not stand up for these officers who are out there just busting their butts day and night without a contract for years. Serving the citizens of Seattle is so dangerous, and they're so understaffed. Yeah. It's nuts. And then the policies in Seattle are just crazy.
Well, Lieutenant, I'm sorry that you experienced that, but I feel really sorry for the residents of Seattle because 600 officers have left the agency in the last 3 years alone. Many of them similar stories as to yours. So the residents are the ones that will suffer because the city's not as safe. God bless you. Thank you so much. I wish you the best with the remainder of your time, and I know you'll probably be in service in some form or some capacity. Thank you so much, Lieutenant.
You're welcome.
All right, coming up, Senator Rand Paul is going to join us next, and a Fox wildfire.
Dr. Anthony Fauci now referred to the DOJ for criminal investigation. We knew this was heading here. Accused of lying under oath to Congress about his knowledge of the U.S.-funded COVID research in Wuhan.
Knowing that it is a crime to lie to Congress, do you wish to retract your statement of May 11th where you claimed that the NIH never funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement. You do not know what you are talking about.
Really? Senator Rand Paul filed the criminal referral and joins us now. Senator, you've been all over this. You've been aggressive. You've been determined. It seems we're at the threshold to the point where you called Matt Graves and said, I need you to look at this. What turned the tables for you? What evidence do you have?
Well, I don't think there's ever been a clear case of perjury in the history of government testimony. And I don't say that lightly. He said adamantly that the government never funded this gain-of-function research. We now have the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, has admitted that the funding came from the NIH. We have the acting director, Tabak, of the NIH, admitting it in writing that it came from the NIH. But now we have really the smoking gun, and that is Fauci in private saying the opposite of what he was saying in public. When he was publicly telling me that absolutely we did not fund gain-of-function research in China, he says privately, we are suspicious that the virus has been manipulated, and we are suspicious because we know they are doing gain-of-function research. He then goes on to describe the research, and it's exactly the research that the NIH funded. So he's caught dead to rights here, but we have an incredibly partisan Attorney General Garland who's refusing to act. So I've taken the extraordinary step of actually going to the local U.S. attorney in D.C. to see if he will act. Now, the problem is there are partisans littered throughout the legal system, and people are seeing this. You don't get prosecuted if you're a Democrat under this administration, no matter what you do.
And one of the lines in the internal communication that were recovered was, Tony doesn't want his fingerprints on any origin stories. Why would that be?
Well, because ultimately culpability attaches. Think about it. 1 million Americans died. This is one of the biggest events, in our lifetime, other than, the wars that we've been through. But in my lifetime, this is 1 million people. In Vietnam, as horrible as it was, 60,000 something, I think, was the total death toll. But 1 million people died. More people died than in the Civil War. And if it came from a lab that we funded, wouldn't we want to know? And if someone made the decision, and here's what in all likelihood happened. There was a safety committee that was supposed to review dangerous research and decide whether or not we should fund it. Fauci went around the committee. He won't admit it, but I think ultimately there's going to be written proof, and I think the House is going to get this if we continue to look into their records, because the government is holding these records tightly, but evidence that Anthony Fauci took this dangerous research and said, no, if they get an exemption, they don't have to be reviewed by the committee to see if it's dangerous. And so they were mixing viruses together to see if they were more transmissible in humans or more dangerous in humans. And it turns out they found that they could create viruses that were more dangerous.
Yeah, some platypus and bat in a cave? Or was he really as concerned as us and had many doubts about that story as we did? One of the quotes from the internal communication was, there were mutations in the virus that would be most unusual to have evolved naturally in the bats, and there was a suspicion that this mutation was intentionally inserted. That doesn't sound like a guy who's trying to tell you it didn't come from a lab leak, right?
And exactly a month later, in a paper that was being written at exactly the same time, in public they say, absolutely that this virus was not a construct of a laboratory. So in private, they're saying it has all the hallmarks of being created in a lab. In public, they're saying it absolutely didn't. And then they were attacking people like myself and others, other scientists as well. They were attacking us and saying we were conspiracy theorists, while in private they're saying this is no conspiracy theory, this is a real thing, and it's the most likely thing that happened. So this is a real definition of a conspiracy, of a cover-up, and we're going to get to the bottom of this because we need to try to make sure this doesn't happen again, and they're still funding this type of research.
Senator, appreciate you staying on it. You're staying to the facts, and I'm sure he wishes you would go away, but you're not. Thanks so much. Senator Rand Paul.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, anybody who brought up things like Rand Paul, like Senator Ron Johnson or Dr. Atlas, they were shadow banned on social media or they were banned entirely. Meanwhile, coming up next, Pete.
On the ground, he's there in Maui. Hey, Max, what's the latest?
Hey, good morning. Yeah, paradise turned into a hellscape. Now, it's still unclear how these fires started, but when they did start on Tuesday, well, Maui was just a tinderbox. Everything was extremely dry and the winds were howling. This was due to Hurricane Dora. It was spinning a couple hundred miles south of the Hawaiian Islands, but it whipped up winds of up to 85 miles per hour. When winds are that strong, it's just impossible for firefighters to stop something like this. It also grounded some firefighting aircraft, and these fires have had devastating consequences on the western side of Maui. Lahaina, a beautiful tourist town, block after block, businesses, homes burnt to the ground, some people having to jump into the ocean to escape the flames. Just harrowing images coming from that community. Now, there's been also a massive undertaking trying to get all the tourists out of Maui. Really, the word from officials is that if you're thinking about coming to Maui, don't at this moment. So far, around 11,000 tourists have been flown out. Guys, back to you.
All right, Max, thank you very much. Let's go to JD over at the weather maps. Janice, it's all about the wind.
Right, and we had sort of this perfect storm happening with high pressure north of Hawaii, and then we had Dora, a strong hurricane, and the pressure gradient between those two is what gave us 70, 80 mile per hour winds. Now, the good news is we've got this large high pressure weakening, and the area of low pressure, Dora, is moving further west. So winds will start to lessen, but we are going to see wind gusts in excess of 20, 40 miles per hour for the island of Maui. This is current wind speeds, so fairly light right now. But as we go further out in time, you can see the island of Maui 20, 30, 40 miles per hour. So that's not good news because we still have to contain some of those wildfires that are burning. Here is Hurricane Dora, 140 mile per hour winds right now. This is a strong Category 4 storm, but it is moving away from Hawaii. So that's the good news. It's going to lessen that pressure gradient. And there is the track. As we go through the next couple of days, it will eventually weaken, but not moving anywhere close to land, which is great news. Quick look at your forecast today. The potential for stronger storms for the mid-Atlantic and the Plains states, and the heat remains the big story as well for parts of the southern tier. All right, Steve, Ainsley, Brian, over to you.
JD, thank you.
Janice.
Meanwhile, elites in Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts, set to attend a grassroots reception this Saturday hosted by none other than our Vice President, Kamala Harris.
All right, so let me ask you, how much would you be willing to pay to hear the vice president speak? Tickets cost up to $10,000 as the campaign claims this money will help ensure the Biden-Harris Democrats have the resources needed to win in 2024.
Here to react is Fox and Friends weekend co-host Pete Hegseth. Would you like to answer Brian's question, Pete? How much would you pay to go hear her speak?
Yeah.
Well, when I think grassroots, when I think salt of the earth,
You think $10,000?
I think Martha's Vineyard.
Right.
I think Martha's Vineyard first. That's where I'm going to hold it. I'm looking for grassroots activism, people fired up. I'm going to Martha's Vineyard. Then, because they're really going for rich elites who could write them big checks, then they realized no one's going to come to this thing. So it was initially probably, I'm speculating here, $1,000 to $10,000, and they said, let's drop it to $500. Oh, yeah, by the way, it's also a grassroots fundraiser, so we got to make it look like anyone can attend, all the way down to $50.
Right.
She can't sell a ticket. That's the problem. So you put her in an impossible situation, though. You send her to Martha's Vineyard, and then you call it a grassroots event, and then no one wants to attend because there's nobody there.
Right.
And $50, I guess, maybe some people will show up for some rubber chicken dinner if there's food served. But she's not a draw, and that's why if Joe Biden were not to run, people are concerned about what comes next.
Yeah, you're probably absolutely right. Anytime one ticket is $10,000 and then you see a let's pack the house with people at 50, it would be nice to see a breakdown of how many people paid 50 and how many paid 10,000, because ultimately it's all about making money, but the DNC, Pete, would never release that.
Well, and $50 a ticket is really good for a state Senate race. And that's not impugning state level races. You got to raise money. But if you're the sitting vice president of the United States running against Orange Man Bad, who you must defeat, and so there must be energy on your side.